I will be reading actually two lectionary readings from the 4th chapter of Luke. The lectionary divided this story into two different texts for 2 different weeks, but they really belong together. And I'll note to you when I'm reading where that break is. This is from 4th chapter of Luke, starting with the 16th verse. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled to your hearing." End of first lectionary reading. All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. They said, "Is not this Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself,' and who will say, 'Do here also to your hometown the things that you have heard you did at Capernaum.' And he said, 'Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to the widow at Zarephath in Sidon. There were also many lepers in Israel at the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except for Naaman the Syrian." When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. They got up, drove him out of town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through them in the midst of them and went on his way. This is the wisdom of God. Were anybody else astonished and amazed by the volcano in Tonga? I don't know about you, but I got the alert. I thought it was an amber alert, but it was a tsunami alert. Amazing that from that volcano, a tsunami went all the way up to Alaska. It was even heard in Alaska, and they had different measures of air pressure in Florida. It's just amazing to me. It serves as a reminder that the earth is a whole. It's not an amalgamation of parts. It's not mechanical. It's a whole organic being. And everything is connected. Thousands of miles away, it is humans who create the boundaries. The virus is also natural. It knows no boundaries either. It affects all people. This is difficult for us to see, but it's true. We have been isolated and feeling difficult and frustrated, thinking that we should have been able to avoid this. Climate change doesn't have any boundaries either, no matter how enthusiastic our patriotism is. Human beings are connected inherently, because you have to be remembering that we are part of nature. Race is a border created by human beings. There is no biological difference between humans of lighter skin and darker skin. We made that boundary. Tongan volcano and the Omicron virus should remind us that exceptionalism is a human concocted fallacy. Exceptionalism being the idea that one is special in some exclusive way. And this idea has become another virus in our midst. The Germans and the Japanese, their exceptionalism precipitated World War II. The case of Japan, they saw themselves as special, that they were in the role of the guardians of Asia against the aggression and the colonialism of Western powers. Where did that get up? What has American exceptionalism given the world? The season of Epiphany in the church year, which we are now in, is about recognizing connections and relationships, and that we are all bound together. Epiphany is about having perspective, being open to diversity, honoring the connections by learning about other peoples and cultures. Experience in another culture is one of the most educational things that one can have. Certainly was true for me. I had to learn that the American way of doing things was not the only way of doing things. You could have it in small things, like learning to walk on the left instead of the right, opening doors out instead of opening them in. When you touch your nose, you have to learn that this is what you say when you say me and not this, and that this means, you can probably see this, come here, and not goodbye. Very confusing. And of course, there's bowing, and you know that you've got bowing down when you start bowing on the phone. I also learned that American direct communication, while having purpose, but in Japan can be seen as haughty and hurtful. Epiphany is a time to reach beyond boundaries, beyond tribalism, exceptionalism, xenophobia, racism. It's a time to embrace diversity. Yet we Americans get so conceited about being special, we forget that it's not just us who claim to be exceptional. It's been here for a long time. Look at Rome. The Romans felt that they were exceptional. They created a world in which people could connect, but they were in charge. It's called Pax Romana. Actually, it just means that Romans were exceptional. Israelites also consider themselves exceptional, the chosen people. The New Testament is rife with stories of Jewish exceptionalism. Pharisaic observance of the law created isolating boundaries. And as Christianity moved from Palestine into the Mediterranean Roman world, the isolationist mindset would not work. For Christianity to blossom, it had to get rid of the boundaries of the culture and include both Jews and Gentiles. This is the world of Luke's community in which he wrote his gospel. The faith had moved from the backwater rural Palestine into the urban centers of the empire. You know, we have a similar dynamic in our country today. The divide in our country is also rural and urban. Somebody who grows up in someplace like Republic, Washington, will have little opportunity to experience another culture, yet in this metropolitan environment, such interactions are commonplace. In our neighborhood, we have the Hindu temple and the Sikh Gurdwara. In our neighborhood, you cannot avoid meeting and getting to know people from India. They're in our preschool, thank goodness. I learned yesterday that the new neighbors who bought the house next door are from India. And it's, for me, an opportunity to learn. How many languages are represented in the Everett School District? Anybody know? Part of our divide that habitates our country today is rooted in how we react to all of these people coming in. Do we embrace the chaos and opportunity that comes with difference, or do we feel aversion? As I said, the text that I read from the lectionary for this Sunday comes in two parts. Luke 4, 16 to 21, and then for next week would be chapter 4, 22 to 30. Yet they are all one story. It is divided right in the middle of a paragraph. The first part, verses 16 to 21, is about Luke's mission. In the synagogue, he reads from 3rd Isaiah, "The Spirit of God is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release of the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and let the oppressed go free. He has sent me to proclaim also the year of the Lord's favor." This serves to say for Luke that the inheritance of the Israeli people is now in Jesus. Luke defines Jesus' purpose as caring for the least of these in an exclusive and radical way. But he's done this from the beginning in the Magnificat. Remember, it says, "He has brought down the powerful from their thrones, lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty." Jesus also has come to serve the poor, the oppressed, the extended, but also the year of the Lord's favor, which refers to the Jubilee, which is about the distribution of wealth. In the story, the initial response of the people in the synagogue was positive. They weren't the wealthy and powerful. They wanted to have some of that redistributed wealth. And they say, "All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth." But that attitude changes when they find out who he is, Joseph's son in Nazareth. Then they didn't feel so good. They wanted an exclusive hero, and they didn't see that as Jesus. In the lectionary reading slated for next week, the response to their doubts, Jesus quotes a common adage about a prophet not welcome in his own land. Surely this only agitated them more. They wanted to be special and exceptional. They wanted somebody to be on their side. They were probably shouting, "Galilee first!" Luke cited two stories from the Old Testament. Another example of biblical interpretation in the Bible. The first story is of God asking Elijah to visit a widow in Zarephath in Sidon. Elijah executed two miracles there. The first was to feed the widow and her son during a drought, and the second was to resuscitate the son when he fell ill. Jesus points out that there were many widows in Israel, but God sent Elijah to a foreigner. That's the point. The second story referred to Elisha healing a general from Syria named Naaman in the River Jordan, and the point again is that Jesus did not heal a person from Israel, but healed a foreigner, a foreign general. Jesus uses both stories to make the point that God's reach is not limited to the boundaries of our home, our nation. You can forget all that Galilee first stuff. For Luke, Jesus' mission is to feed the hungry, set the prisoners free, comfort the oppressed, and return wealth to all people. That's the first part. The second part of the mission is in the second lectionary text for next week that says part of Jesus' mission is also to reach out to, include, and learn from foreigners. And how did the people respond to this radical message of love? They caused an insurrection, so to speak. Anyway, they drove him to the edge of the cliff for saying these things. What has happened to Christianity in America? Rather than accept and extend Jesus' mission to the poor, the destitute, the widows, the forgotten, those who have disabilities, to the addicts, rather than to learn from other cultures, we Christians have taken Jesus to the cliff. Is it that people in America don't read Luke's gospel? Is that it? How is it that the faith has become identified with those who promote American exceptionalism? The gospel is not about exceptionalism. American first is antithetical to the gospel. The gospel is about acceptance, inclusion, and inherent connection with each other. It's about reaching out to and learning from others, learning the language of others. It's about accepting immigrants because we need them. Whatever happened to equality? Recently on NPR, I listened to a story. I listen to NPR when I'm in the car, so I never catch all of it. Or this may be aging. And the subject was, how many Americans are not interested in learning anything more? Not learning anything more. Particularly not interested in the history and the culture of other people. This is what American exceptionalism is giving us. America is the best country ever created in the world. Do you ever hear that? It's got conceit. So if we are the best country in the whole world ever, even more than Rome, why learn anything more? We know it all. It's created a habit of expecting to be right, and being right is part of our identity. And that is right because we think it's right. This has caused the dumbing down of America. The dumbing down of America. American exceptionalism has brought us Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and Jim Jordan. American exceptionalism has given us a myopic vision and inanity. I didn't want to say stupidity, but you get it. The opposite of myopic is presbyopic, has nothing to do with Presbyterians. And while myopic means nearsighted, presbyopic means farsighted. The gospel needs to be presbyopic and not myopic. We need to see beyond our tribe and community. We need to learn that we're all connected. Therefore, the more we learn about others, the more we will learn about ourselves. Living in a foreign culture is not the easiest thing to do. The communication, the subtle form of communication, trying to listen for what's not said was difficult. But I learned a lot. The door going out after 3 feet of snow have landed in front of it. I had to call to get help. Why do they do that? But alas, I gained experience and perspective, and I think wisdom. One time, Donald Trump was asked who he consulted, and he said himself. There's a proverb in Japanese, Hiza tomo dango, which means consult everyone, even your knees. We wonder what's wrong with America today. People want to be exceptional and they want to be right. Exceptionalism has replaced equality as an ideal. And it's okay not to consult anybody? Didn't we hear what Barney said? Everyone is special in their own way. Did we ever learn from Pentecost when people were able to understand each other's language? What's happened to America? Do we not know that we're all connected? Anything that says me first, America first, or any such rallying cry is not only morally suspect, it's just not true. Now, I'm sure you all have heard of these two incidences in the last 2 weeks, the one about the Jewish synagogue in Texas, and then in the paper recently. I don't know all the details of this, but a United Methodist Church in Tennessee was a part of not allowing a Jewish couple to foster children. I've worried about the pandemic being a time where we forget who we are and what we're about, and we get out of practice at including others, embracing diversity, and seeing the whole. As we isolate, that we may feel disconnected from others. I fear that xenophobia is increasing in America, and that is not what the gospel is about. I think we all know the story of the astronauts who went up and when they first looked down on the earth, tried as hard as they could to find their home. Then they tried to find their country. Last of all, they saw natural things and saw the whole. All the boundaries that we make there are not there. We must re-enchant ourselves with the wholeness of reality, celebrate our connections, reach out to others as if they are our own, because they are. The mission of Jesus is to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, set the prisoners free, distribute wealth, create equality, and the second story, to be presbyopic, farsighted, and open to the world. In the Spirit of Jesus, amen.